you'll see that Ms. Gama was then employed in a letter of appointment or offer employment was made to her on the 26th of January. You see that, page 112?
Yes.
Do you know whether she was then employed?
Sorry?
Did you ever meet Gugu Gaba?
No, I don't know her.
All right.
Never met her.
Okay. Then I'd like to go to the Times Live article, please. And that you will find.
So I'm sorry. So Mr. Gama, somebody who is appointed under this process that we talked about, which doesn't necessarily require outside advertisement. I think that's what you said. If it is somebody who is not coming from within the organization, do you know how they would normally find such a person, or whether there might be somebody in the department who is aware that there is a position that requires these skills and they know somebody who has got those skills, they talk to them? Or do you know whether it's a situation where people just write and say, I've got these qualifications, have you got a position for me? I'm just wondering if there's been no advertisement, how somebody gets to know that there is such a position in a big organization such as Transnet and its divisions.
Yeah, no, there are many ways, and in terms of how it could happen, sometimes you get referrals. For instance, when I look at this particular one, it looks like it's something which was in the total quality management space, which is the Lean Six Sigma. It's around improvement of processes and trying to make sure that you have less waste and all of that. At some point, it became a very important aspect in terms of the kind of work that they were doing. So process improvement, continuous improvement was key. And there were a lot of people that we were able to get from outside. And there were specific manufacturing organizations that were targeted, like NAMPAC, the breweries,
which could have people with such skills.
Which had these kinds of skills, Mondi, SAPI, all of those. So, and then once you had some of those people come in, some of them then recommended others that they'd worked with.
Okay.
To say, look, you're still looking for more people, we also know.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Magic.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to return to the Times Live article that you found at page 250.310. Chairperson, our learned friends have provided us with a copy of the invoice that we spoke about. Could I, and we have made copies, could I hand it up?
Yes.
I've put handwritten pagination as 250.341, so it will come right at the end of the bundle. We will obviously add it formally to the bundle in due course.
Yeah. Okay. But in the meantime, you said we should go to what page?
310, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you.
250.310. Mr. Gama, your invoice that we've been provided with will be added to the bundle right at the end. You have a copy in front of you. Do you want to say anything about it now before we go to the article?
No. I think if you look at the invoice, it will say to you, it will show you all of those numbers. And then at the end, at the bottom there, it will say 24/01/16, which is the date on which I left. It will say paid. So I think that will indicate that when I left that place, I had paid. So I did just ask the hotel to send me a copy, and this is the copy that they sent, because I didn't have a copy.
Perhaps I could just, and obviously I'd need to study this document, but if you compare it to 328, perhaps you could do that now. 328.
28.
I see that if you compare 328 to this document, on the right-hand side, it ends after rate. So you don't have a printed on date, nor the cashier, nor the page. Does your document 341, does it reflect the date upon which it was printed?
The date when they printed it?
Yes.
I don't see anything on the invoice itself. It probably will be in the email that they sent me, in terms of when they sent it to me, when I requested for it. I don't see any dates. It just shows the arrival date, arrival time, and the departure time.
All right. Well, let's perhaps deal with that in the context of the Times Live article at 3:10.
Yeah. And in fact, I think that it's slightly different in the sense that on the other one, it just says departure. I think it's just a custom number. They just put 12. Here it says 823, so which would have been a more live document.
Sorry, what did you say?
I'm saying if you look at the one on 328 versus 341,
Yes.
at departure, the only difference I see there is the
time.
It's got the time as well.
Right.
Well, the times for departure are different.
Yes.
They are
Yeah.
in regard to the two.
Yeah.
But the time for arrival seems to be the same
Yes.
on both.
Yeah.
All right. So if we then go to 3:10, I'm going to take you through this article, if I may, and ask you for your comments along the way. So it starts off by saying, or it's headed, Transnet CEO's Dubai hotel stay, how Gupta's got the bill. And it starts off by saying 2 months before being permanently appointed as Transnet Group CEO, Siyabonga Gama enjoyed a 2-night stay at the 5-star Oberoi Hotel in Dubai, apparently courtesy of the Gupta family. Gama has confirmed meeting key Gupta Lieutenant Salim Essa during the stay, but denies that the Guptas paid for him. Is that correct?
Yes.
The leaked Gupta emails have revealed a booking confirmation email to Gupta-owned Sahara Systems Chief Executive Ashu Chawla under Gama's name. We've seen that, correct?
Yes.
Chawla then forwarded the email to longtime Gupta family associate, Essa, who until recently was a 60% majority shareholder of Trillion Capital Partners, financing consulting firm that netted millions in contracts with state-owned entities, Transnet and Eskom. Do you have any comment on that?
Comment on the paragraph.
Well, I suppose what we have seen is that Chalwa then did forward the email to
Yes.
ESSA. That we've seen.
Yes, I've seen the forwarding of the email, yeah.
Trillion was formed when CEO Eric Wood broke away from his partners at Regiment's Capital, a company which already had established business links with state-owned companies. Did you ever know that that's how Trillion was formed? With Mr. Wood breaking away from Regiment?
I think it's things that we came to understand.
All right.
There was a session from regiments that was asked in favor of Trillion at the point when it happened.
Wood last month bought ESSA's shares in Trillion. That would have been August 2017. But when confronted with allegations that Gupta's or their associate had picked up the tab, Gama insisted he had paid his own way. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Gama also provided an invoice which he claimed to be from the Oberoi and which is stamped paid. The invoice does not show the hotel's name, does not say who settled the bill, and was printed in June 2017, a year and a half after he stayed at the Oberoi Hotel. And around the same time, he was approached for comment by Times Live for the first time. You want to comment on that?
Yes, I didn't have a copy of the bill, so I approached the hotel to send me. I just gave them the dates when I was there.
Yes, but this paragraph reflects that you provided the journalist with an invoice.
Yes, it could be this. It would be this invoice.
But how can it be that invoice? Because it's recorded here, unless it's wrong, that the invoice does not show the hotel's name, does not say who settled the bill, and was printed in June 2017.
You probably got it wrong.
All right, so do I understand that you say that you sent this invoice, 250.341, to the journalist?
Yeah.
All right?
Yes, there isn't any other.
The leaked emails reveal, however, that a month after Gama's stay in February 2016, the Oberoi emailed Chwala a statement for Sahara Computer's outstanding account. I think we've seen that, correct?
Yeah, yes, we've seen that.
On the account, Gama's bill is listed as unpaid, including that of Denel's board chairperson, Mr. Dan Mancha, and Eskom head of generation, Michelle Koko. The amount is the same as on the invoice Gama provided. We've seen that, correct?
Yes, we saw that this morning.
And then
I'm sorry, can I go back to the invoice 341? The journalist there says that the invoice that she's talking about, or he's talking about, was stamped paid. I see the words paid here, but I don't think that is stamped paid. Can any of you see stamped paid or a stamp with paid? Because I think that's what I expect if someone says stamped paid.
Also, we don't. This one has got the hotel name, so I don't know how they could say it didn't have the hotel name. So
Yes.
it's inconsistencies.
Yes.
So one can't talk on behalf of the reporter.
Yeah. Okay.
So-
all right.
if you look at the invoice, there's no stamped paid. Then there's an error because there is the hotel name. And then the invoice that the journalist had, according to this paragraph, was printed in June 2017. Can you see that 341 was printed in June 2017?
I can't see any dates on that, but I do have the actual email that sent it to me. So I don't have the dates on here. I don't know where the person gets the date from.
Then we were at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth paragraph in the middle of the page. Quote, I can confirm that Salin Essa of Trillion was a contractor of Transnet, Gama said. Did you provide that information to the journalist?
Yes.
quote, when I was in Davos, I received a request for a meeting from ESA. Since I travelled on Emirates Airlines, he suggested he meet me in Dubai during the stopover since he was in Dubai at the time, Gama continued. Is that correct?
Yes.
Quote, I agree, and he suggested that he will reserve a hotel room, which I paid for. He said, adding that Trillion and Regiment's contracts were later cancelled by Transnet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Gama explained that ESA, quote, raised the issue of his involvement in Trillion, which was being formed as an offshoot of Regiments. Want to comment on that?
Yeah, it must have been the discussions that I had with ESA when I was in Dubai.
Now, you'll remember on Monday when you gave evidence, your evidence was that there had been no mention of Trillion and there was no mention of a migration from Regiments to Trillion. You spoke in the abstract about the potential formation of a wholly owned black consultancy company.
That's correct. But on Monday, it was now 5 years after I had met ESA. This one is probably more correct because it was probably still fresher in my head in terms of what had been discussed. This is 2017. This is 4 years ago. So if you ask me now, it's 6 years later, it's a bit... I can't give you exact, but I think the context and the discussion remains the same.
So tell us what you and Mr. Essa discussed about Trillion in Dubai.
Do you want us to read the article which looks a little bit fresher, or you want me to try and recall? I would need to read this because this happened in 2017, Chair. In terms of one's memory, at that time, I would say it was still a bit fresher. I can't remember word for word, but I think the context, as I've said, of creating a black-owned firm with the consulting capability, South African-owned, was really the key thing that was being discussed. So you will see in 2017, Trillion had then also had been formed by that time. When I had met ESA, I think it was still a concept. So I think those are the differences.
Well, you say here that ESA raised the issue of his involvement in Trillion, which was being formed as an offshoot of Regiments. Of course, the club loan, which you authorized payment of, that was to Trillion in December of 2015, not so?
Well, we're going to have to look at the dates.
All right.
So is the position that you had not intended to go to Dubai or stop there and spend 2 nights prior to Mr. Essa calling you? That's a change in your plans that occurred as a result of that call from him.
Yeah, I had wanted to buy the dress. That was my whole intention. And
yes.
Then when you called, then I got the idea that in any event, because I'm stopping there, I could just stay 1 night long. It sounds like 2 nights, but I arrived early hours of the morning.
And then...
yes.
Okay.
And then I just spent 1 night and then I left, yeah.
Okay, so you may have been there for around 24 hours or just over 24 hours.
I'd say 36.
About 36.
Yeah, between 30 and 36 hours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so initially, were you going to spend the night at all? You were going to have a stopover by and then proceed?
I was going to stop over, and I think the stopover was fairly long.
Quite a few
maybe
hours.
7 or 8 hours at the airport, and then
Continue.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So you say in terms of the 2 nights, it might look like 2 nights in the normal way,
Yes.
but it was less than 48 hours.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would have arrived there probably 1 or 2 a.m. thereabouts.
okay.
And then...
Oh, and of course, in the hotel, you would have been booked the previous night, I
Yes,
guess.
the hotel starts charging you from 7 o'clock the previous day. So,
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, in relation to that paragraph, what I'd been asking you about whether or not you authorized payment to Trillian in December. Perhaps you could just keep your finger at 311, and then turn to page 250.72. So 250.72, this is an invoice from Trillian for lead arranger of the ZAR 12 billion club loan facility. And you were being charged Transnet 82 million with VAT 93 million. Is it correct that you authorized that?
yes.
On the 3rd of December 2015,
Yes.
a month before you met Mr. Issa?
Yes, except that this is Trillian Asset Management, which is a capital raising entity. As I understand it, it's owned by someone else, a different person.
Then if we go back to 311,
So I don't know at which point ESA assumed any ownership of Trillian, whether it's this Trillian or it's another Trillian. I think you may have the name, but I think there was something called Trillian Capital, I think. There could be Trillian Consulting. So I don't think it's the same entities that we're talking about.
Or they might be related companies.
Yeah, they could be related parties in terms of maybe ownership. But this one of Trillian Asset Management was a different entity.
I'm sorry, you said
It's also quite possible, Chair, that when we are talking in 2017, you now know the name of the entity that was eventually formed to be this Trillian. Because if you read the this newspaper article, it says that Wood last month bought ESA's shares in Trillian. So I don't know those dealings. I'm not privy to that, but lots of things could have happened.
Okay. What page did you say we must go to, Mr. Mayback?
I take it, Mr. Gama, to page 72. I'd want to go back now to the article at 311, Chairperson. So then the next paragraph says, ESA said the expertise would remain the same as core resources would be migrated from regiments, and that the quality of work for Transnet would be unaffected, Gama told Times Live. Did you say that?
Yes, I must have.
All right, and then Gama was booked to stay in the deluxe suite for 2 days between January 22 and 24, 2016. Says that you were permanently appointed as GCEO in April 2016 after acting in that position from April 2015. Goes on to say flight bookings found in the leaked emails show that AJ Gupta was in Dubai for half a day at the same time. Gama denied ever having ever met with Ajay Gupta, saying he only met Essa in Dubai, and later confirmed he had met Essa on previous occasions at the Transnet offices. Does that refer to those 2 occasions that you've testified about?
That's correct.
And then there's a lot in the next page. It's not particularly relevant, but can I take you 4 paragraphs from the bottom of page 312? Information from the leaked Gupta emails revealed a contract between Hong Kong-based company Tequesta, owned by Essa, and locomotive manufacturer China South Rail, which resulted in Tequesta netting around 5.3 billion in consultancy fees since 2014. CSR, one of 4 companies, was awarded the lion's share of Transnet's 50 billion locomotive procurement project in 2014. Gama, in July this year, announced Transnet had appointed worksmen's attorneys to conduct an investigation into these claims, which include whether or not Transnet was overcharged and if it followed its own procurement processes. You want to comment on any of that?
Yeah, I think the investigations which we started in June or July 2017 were occasioned by these reports that we received. And I think we then received also a formal letter from the EFF with much more details, which we then gave to worksmen in order for them to undertake the investigation.
And then it goes on to say, Advocate Jeff Butlander was also tasked to investigate Trillion by its former board chair, Toka Sekwale. And it concludes by saying his report, released at the end of June 2017, said Transnet paid around 105 million to Trillion between April and June 2016, some of which appear to be work regiments had actually done. You want to comment on that?
Yes, it was on this basis that there appeared to be, what should I call it, between regiments and Trillion. There appeared to be a lot of fights that they picked up amongst themselves after regiments had asked us to cede the work to Trillion. And then when Transnet had paid some of these invoices to Trillion, then regiments had come back at a later stage and said, look, this invoice should have been paid to regiments, or there were claims that the people were not Trillion people, they were regiments people. We started getting very confused at Transnet as to what was Trillion and what was regiments. And it was at that point, because now people had to generate credit notes and debit notes, it seemed that there was a dispute and arguments even amongst them as to whether the people who had done the work had left regiments to become Trillion. And so, you know, if somebody has been working for you, so somebody came to the company, they were regiments at a point. And then they say, no, we are no longer regiments. We are part of Trillion. We are continuing with the work. And then there's other new people who are Trillion. And then the regiment comes back later and says, no, but you know these people to be regiments people. Why do you pay Trillion? It was that kind of confusion that started to arise. And then we then said, look, we don't want to get involved in whatever it is that they were doing, because regiments had written to us to say there was a re-engineering exercise that they were performing, and as a result of that re-engineering exercise, Trillion would now do the work. They then came back maybe in August or September, I can't remember, to say that re-engineering exercise that they wanted to do had not succeeded, and that therefore everything would now go back to regiments. We now found ourselves at the center of trying to say, was this invoice trillion, was it regiments, it was whatever. Then I just said to the legal team, look, there's lots of things that are going on here that I don't understand. It is just better for us to extricate ourselves from this connection that was this firm.
It sounds similar to what I've had in relation to ESCOM, McKinsey, and Trillion and regiments. But I don't see what is confusing as far as I'm concerned. Because if you are Transnet, you have a contract with regiments, and they've done the work, you owe regiments, not somebody else. If some of regiment staff resign or move elsewhere, you pay regiments. It's their own story what they do. You have a contract with regiments.
Yeah, I think what you didn't hear, Chair, they wrote to us in March or thereabouts. Regiments wrote to us in March and say, we are ceding the contract to Trillion. So then the session took place, and then the invoices were now being paid to Trillion.
But
And then at a later date, regiments then says, you paid.
you should have paid us, not
Yes,
them.
yes.
Yes, but
And then we are saying to them, we are not the ones that should be trying to manage your dispute as Transnet. And then they were writing all kinds of letters to say, but even the people that came there, they were regiments people, you knew that, etc., etc. That's when we then just said, look, we had been told by regiments that they are ceding the contracts to Trillion, and that's why we paid Trillion. If regiments is saying they want to hold Transnet liable for something which they are saying belongs to them but was paid by Transnet to to Trillion. That was the confusion, Chair. I was not confused about who we should pay, but we're now getting into nitty-gritty of things that had nothing to do with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Mybeck?
Yes, thank you. Perhaps whilst we're now dealing with Trillion and this club loan is something that's on our radar, can we perhaps just deal with that? The club loan documents, if we're going to deal with them in chronological order, need to start, please, with page 298, 250.298. And this is a memorandum to the BADEC, as we know it, from yourself. That's what it reflects. Requesting to appoint Trillion as lead manager in the 1 billion ZAR equivalent club loan. If we go to the end of the document, Mr. Gama, page 302, the recommendation was that the Acquisitions and Disposal Committee 1 approve the appointment of Trillion in the place of JP Morgan as a lead manager for the $1.5 billion ZAR equivalent club loan, which was previously confined to JP Morgan. 2, approve the termination of JP Morgan's ZAR syndication loan. 3, delegate authority to the GCE to approve all documentation relating to this confinement. And that is something that you recommended yourself on the 22nd of September 2015. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what was the cause of, or the need for the termination of JP Morgan's ZAR syndication loan?
Yeah. So, Chair, this is a memo which, when I sign it, it is 5 days old. Can we agree with that? As I mean, 7 days old. Can we agree with that, Mr. Mebe? It is compiled by the group treasurer, because we're going to have to read into the record what the group treasurer told us as the compiler of the document. So he compiles the document on the 15th. Is it the 15th? Oh, okay.
15 September 2017. Well,
It's 17 September.
When they write dates like this,
Yes.
you don't know whether 17 is the date or the year. But
Yeah, I start with the year, but a lot of people start with the date. With the date, yeah. So, yeah, he started with the day.
also that's the date, the day.
So he starts on the 17th.
2015.
Yes.
Okay, the next one signed on the same date.
Yeah, so those two could have been together to sign it.
Yeah, and the next one signed the day
On the
after,
18th.
and then you signed on the 22nd of September.
Yes.
Right.
So when you read into the record, you need to then say, you ask the question, and then the two of us can then go into the body of the document to find out the questions that Mr. Maybeck wants to ask.
As to why it was necessary to terminate JP Morgan's mandate, what part do you want to go to?
So in the discussion, under discussion, he says under number 12, that when it became apparent that JP Morgan, maybe let's start it a little bit earlier. On number 6, or maybe at number 4, he says that there were two tranches to this. One is a US dollar 1.5 billion facility, and the other one is a standby facility of $1 billion. And then he indicates that JP Morgan had been appointed through a confinement to lead the club, the ZAR club, as a substitute for the US dollar standby facility to bring the overall costs of the transaction lower and to avoid foreign exchange exposure. And then at number 6, he then says Transnet considered a dual tranche to fund the Chinese locomotives acquisition. And then at number 7, he then says it was decided to utilize the 1.5 billion from CDB and JP Morgan was to underwrite the ZAR equivalent funding, which was then the 1 billion. So JP Morgan was initially going to underwrite $1 billion. He then says it would have enabled Transnet to meet the rating agency requirements. And then consequently, there was a revised term sheet and mandate letter with CDB as a result of that. And then he says Regiment's Capital was appointed as a 1064 locomotive funding advisor. And he then says that one of their SD initiatives was to develop other smaller black-owned organizations in the industry, and that's when then this Trillion Asset Management then arises. He says it's one of the beneficiaries of that initiative. If we then go into JP Morgan, he says that it became apparent that JP Morgan would not be able to deliver the ZAR loan regiments, and then regiments engaged with its SD beneficiary to see if there were options available to Transnet. He then says that Trillion would be able to deliver on Transnet's requirements for a club loan deal at a price and a tenure which was most comparable to both the CDB loan and the Morgan proposal. So he then moves away from the initial underwriting, which was JP Morgan was going to do the 1 billion according to this. Then he moves to a club loan, which means different banks would now syndicate different amounts to create the same thing. I think they called it blended, I think they used the word blended funding. The reason they said they went for this was because it would be cheaper to do a blended loan with different banks than for JP Morgan to do one where it underwrites it itself. I think that was the discussion, but I was not party to the discussion, so everything that I know is the things that I was told in this memo.
All right. So you confirm then, if I understand you correctly, that the group treasurer, Mr. Ramasabudi,
Yes,
was the actual author of this,
that's correct.
this memo. All right.
Yes.
So that is something you signed on 22 September 2015. Can you then please go to page 250.63?
Just before we go there, with regard to this memo, Mr. Gama, my understanding of the fact that you were the most senior person among the signatories
Yes.
of that memo, and that the memo was directed at a higher authority, I would imagine,
Yes.
a committee of the board. My understanding would be that you would be the one taken to be the owner of the memo. Now, I must explain what I mean when I say the owner. As far as the committee is concerned, to whom the memo was addressed, if they wanted to hold anybody responsible about what they were told here, they would look to you, because you are the most senior person who signed. Whether your subordinates got anything wrong, that would be between you and your subordinates. Would that be a fair understanding?
Yeah, some of these issues, Chair, are complex matters.
Yeah.
And we always had to make sure that the people who, so somebody would have come, for instance, I probably would have called Peter to say, okay, you guys have come up with this. Can you explain for me 1, 2, 3, 4? And then they would explain, and I'd say, okay, no, it makes sense. And then on that basis, then I would sign, and then we go to the committee. But I would not even attempt at the committee to try and explain this myself.
Okay. Okay.
We would get the compiler, the treasurer, to go to the committee to explain this, because this is what they do for a living. This is what they wake up to go to work to do. A chief executive is a general manager. A chief executive,
they are specialists.
Yes, these people are specialists in their area. The chief executive is somebody who tries to bring a lot of different issues together, but you cannot be a jack of all trades. Yeah.
So what you are saying is what you are saying this, that yes, to a certain extent, the committee would be entitled to look to me
Yes,
because I'm the most senior person who recommended,
yes,
and I'm expected to recommend what I understand.
that's correct.
I can't recommend something I don't understand.
That's correct.
But there would be an understanding that there might be certain intricacies in respect of which I might need specialists to
Yes.
come and explain some of the details.
Yes,
Is that right?
that's correct. And in fact, when the memo is still new, it's still even fresh in your mind what they've explained to you. But if you meet the same memo,
Yeah. Years later.
years
you
later,
won't remember.
you will not remember because it's not
Yeah.
your bread and butter.
Okay, all right. Mr. Mybeck?
So do I understand that you then relied heavily on the advice of Mr. Peter?
Yes,
And this was in September of 2015.
September 15, yes.
I just want to mention to you, there is evidence before the Commission that Mr. Peter, in August of 2015 and other months, received so-called invoice tracking schedules from Mr. Wood at Regiments.
Sorry, he received what?
So-called invoice tracking schedules from Mr. Wood at Regiments that indicated payments being made to Gupta-linked shell companies, for example, Homex, etc. It indicated how payments made to regiments were then split out amongst various companies. Did you know anything about that?
No, I don't know anything about it. You are saying he knew about...
I'm saying there's some evidence before the Commission that he received invoice tracking schedules which reflected how amounts paid to regiments were disbursed amongst various companies.
Invoice
He is saying there is evidence that has been laid before the Commission, which reflects that around this time, September and other months of 2015 or thereabout, Mr. Peter was being furnished with invoice schedules showing how money that had been paid to regiments was being divided or distributed among certain companies related to the Guptas or associated with the Guptas. Is that correct, Mr. Mybeck?
Yes, certainly.
Yes, so that's what he...
So that's what he's saying, okay.
Yeah, that's what he's saying, and he's asking whether you know anything about that. And
No,
I think
no,
you've said, yeah.
no.
Okay.
So perhaps I can just, and I do appreciate that you haven't been party to this, let me just explain it in a little bit more detail. So the evidence before the Commission, and of course I premise all of this again, DCJ, on the fact that it's not to say that you will accept this, but there is some evidence that reflects the following, Mr. Gama. And that is that regiments were appointed as McKinsey's skills supply development partner in relation to the 1064 transaction advisory contract. And they were appointed in circumstances where there was an agreement that Mr. Essa would get 50% kickback of regiment's fees, payments to them, and Mr. Kabun Mudli would get 5%. Now, the two entities nominated by those gentlemen were Mr. Essa. Payments were made to a company by the name of Homex, and in the case of Mr. Mudli, payments were made to a company by the name of Albertine. So what these invoice tracking schedules would show is amounts paid. So they came in from Mr. Wood from regiments. They would show that X amount was paid to regiments, and then it would reflect that 50% was due to Homex and 5% was due to Albertine. Those are the schedules that there's evidence of Mr. Peter having received, and incidentally, it's something that still needs to be dealt with. Mr. Singh also, this is still to be put to him, but there is also some evidence to the effect that he similarly received those schedules.
No.
You don't know about that?
No, I don't know anything about it. No.
And then I did put to you yesterday, for what it's worth, that you probably have heard that Mr. Singh had 8 safe deposit boxes at Knoxville. You've heard that, have you?
No, I don't know the number. I've heard this concept of Knoxville. So, as you know, I did write to the commission about it because my name was also at some point associated with this.
So you,
I don't know the
you've heard
number.
about the company,
All right.
and you have heard that he had some safety boxes, but you don't know the number.
Yes, no, there was a newspaper article, Chair,
Yes, okay.
that said there was this vaults.
Yeah.
As I understand it, is safety deposit boxes. And in that newspaper article, my name was cited. So I had occasion then, it was in 2019, to write to the commission to say, I see my name next to this Knoxville, but I think we've since come back to indicate that no, my name should not have been, should not have appeared there. But I know that Mr. Singh's name also appeared next to that. I think it was my name and Brian Molif and Singh, but some of that is not true.
Well, I think perhaps it's appropriate to place formally on record, as you know, Chairperson, that there's certainly no formal evidence from within the Commission that Mr. Gama has or had a safety deposit box at Knoxville.
Yeah.
And then perhaps just to end that off, Mr. Peter, or certainly his mother, I don't know if you know anything about this, he or she had 7 safe deposit boxes there.
No, I don't know anything
All
about
right.
it.
Okay. Well, I suppose we all keep our money in different places. Now, that is then the 22nd of September 2015. Take you to the next document in the chronology. And that you find at page 250.63. So remember the memorandum that you recommended was placed before the acquisition, what was meant for the Acquisition and Disposal Committee.
Yes.
And you see that on the 1st of October 2015, they then resolved essentially exactly the same as your recommendation, correct?
Yes.
Then if you go over the page, on the 18th of November 2018, this document is addressed to Transnet by Trillion. The document you'll see that you signed.
Where are you now?
I beg your pardon, I'm at page 64, the page after the resolution of the BADC.
Yes.
So this is a letter, seems an engagement letter really, dated the 18th of November from Trillion to Transnet, and you'll see at page 250.66 that you signed this document.
Yes.
And so did Mr. Peter.
Yes.
And it's signed on behalf of Trillion by Mr. Daniel, is it Ray?
I think it says Roy.
Roy. Had you ever met Mr. Daniel Roy?
No.
Had you ever met anybody from Trillion?
Yeah, which trillion? There's
Well,
trillions, there are many of them.
This Trillion, this letter comes from Trillion Boutique Asset Management.
Yeah, I don't know, Mr. Roy.
Okay. But had you ever met anyone from this company?
Yeah, I thought that you'd said that Mr. Wood, he bought some shares from Trillion. I had known Wood from Regiment.
So this is a letter of engagement. It's the 12 billion rand club loan facility. And if you go over the page to 65, you'll see that at 3.1, the third paragraph, 82 million due and payable upon execution of the club loan facility agreement relating to the transaction. You see that?
Yes.
So that's 18 November 2015. You will see if you now go to page 72 that on the same day, 18 November 2015, Trillion then furnish Transnet with an invoice. Do you see that?
Yes. The invoices were, I think they accompanied this.
Yes.
They probably accompanied this agreement and are related to
All right.
that document that you were showing me earlier, that Mr. Ramosebudi
Okay.
wrote. Yeah.
So do I understand that the work had then already been done? Is that what you say?
Sorry?
Had the work already been done? Or
No, I'm saying that if I take you back to where we were, if I take you to 303,
yes.
there is a document at 303.
Yeah, we're going to come to that in the chronology.
Yes.
So when you say take you back, you mean take you forward?
No, we were there.
No, we went at 303. I think the document you're looking for.
We're in the page before. That's
Yeah.
when he said, let's go to the next page, I went to this page, but he was somewhere else.
Okay.
I think you meant 298, Mr. Gama. In other words, it's linked to that Ramasabudi memo
Yes.
that you approved. Well, absolutely.
I'm saying all of this, they should be read together.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Because they are part of the same
We
thing.
get the memo, we get the bad egg resolution, and then we get the letter of engagement, except we must read it together.
Yes.
And we get the invoice. So I think the only point I'm making is, perhaps I could just ask you to comment on this. There's a letter of engagement. In other words, these people are saying, this is what we're going to do, right? And we're going to be paid upon the execution of the club loan facility. They tell you that on the 18th of November 2015. And on the same day, they send you an invoice that you see at page 250.72, correct?
Yes, except that the memo that we just gone through, Ramosebudi claims that they've been working with him for 5 months previous. This is the memo that we sent to the board. So he says at page 300, point 24.
But Mr. Gama, Trillion hadn't existed for 5 months. That's the point. The
Well, I don't know. I'm just telling you what Ramosebudi says. So he says, I've been working with these people for 5 months. And then he then writes another memo to say, sign this agreement, which is the agreement we're going through now. which is what we're discussing now with Mr. Mayberg in November. He then says, here is an agreement that you must sign. So I'm saying all of these things are related. We mustn't look at them as if they are not related. The first thing that happens is the
memo.
Is the memo that goes to the
Committee.
committee. Then the committee approves. Once the committee approves, you then get the resolution. And then he writes another memo attaching this agreement. And that's the one that I said we mustn't pretend as if they are not related. He writes another memo attaching this to say, can you please sign the agreement based on what was approved on the 1st of October.
So, Mr. Gama, I fully appreciate they must be read together, but if I take you back to the invoice, do I understand what you're saying then? Is as far as you're concerned, this work had already been done?
According to what I just showed you on page 300.24, he says that...
I'm sorry, Mr. Gama, you have talked about page 300.24.
Yes.
Is that paragraph 24 you talk about?
It's paragraph 24.
At page 250.300.
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
So it reads,
Oh, yes.
the
Mr.
financial
Mayberg.
advice and negotiation support that Trillion provided through this entire process took in excess of 5 months, which was done at risk with the expectation of compensation only on successful completion of the transaction. That's what he said.
Yes, that's what he said. So I'm saying if you take it from that, then he's saying there's work that had been done for 5 months before this, and then he then attaches this agreement to the other memo. So it's now month 6. So I think you have to assume, according to him, it's now the 6th month, and then here is an invoice. So I'm saying to you, Mr. Mayberg, that it can't be that you think that as soon as the agreement is signed, then there's an invoice. According to Ramosebudi, he's saying they've done work for 6 months. That I can't vouch. I've never been.
Yeah, so what you are saying, I guess your answer should have been a yes to Mr.
Yes.
Mayberg. You're saying, based on what you were told, you understood that work had been done for 5 months.
Yes.
What you are saying is whether that was factually true or not, you don't know.
That I don't know, but I'm just
Yes.
saying it
That
follows
was your
from what he
understanding.
had said, yes.
Yeah, you say that was your understanding.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
All right, and then what we see, so that was your understanding. Then what we see is, if you go to page 73,
I'm sorry, where's the agreement that Mr. Gama says? That Mr.
we'll come
Aaron
to the memo
to it.
that I think he refers to, Chairperson, in the chronology. There is another memorandum. I'm going to come to that.
Okay.
So the invoice is dated 18 November 2015, and then if you go over the page, there's a
Where is the invoice? I'm trying to make sure I don't lose you.
The invoice is at page 72, Chairperson. 250,
Okay.
72.
Yeah, these documents are too far apart.
Yes, they are.
And it makes it difficult to follow.
That's what I was saying, that we should have brought all of them together because they talk to
Is
the same thing.
it not possible, Mr. Mayberg, even if it's after today, maybe because of the complications of pagination, is it not possible to take all of them together and put them at the back, in the right sequence? Yeah, there will be duplication, but that's fine. Then we know where to find all of them.
We will do that.
Yeah.
DCG. All right, so the invoice is at page 72. At page 73 is the payment advice dated the 19th of November. Is that also your signature? Mr. Gama?
Where's the payment advice?
73.
73.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's 250.73. Because I'm looking at page 73, but not 250.
250.72 and 250.73.
Okay, all right. It seems that it will be important to keep on saying 250 because
Certainly.
there may be confusion if we just say 73 because there is a 73. Okay, 250.73.
Yes, so that takes us to the 19th of November 2015. Now, if I can take you, please, to the second memorandum that Mr. Gama has been referring to and to the agreement that you asked about, Chairperson. That memorandum you find back at page 303, 250.303. This is now signed by Mr. Gama on the 3rd of December 2015. And Mr. Gama, you confirm that you signed it on the 3rd of December 2015?
Yes.
And is this again, this is something, it seems, it's addressed to you, Mr. Peter and Mr. Selinga, from Mr. Ramasabudi. So he is again the author of this document, in effect. Is that right?
That is correct.
And the recommendation is, it's recommended that the acting GCE and the acting GCFO sign off on Trillion Asset Management's invoice for services rendered to and on behalf of Transnet in its capacity as Trillion's originating and coordinating mandate lead arranger for the ZAR 12 billion club facility. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that then takes us back. So after you signed that on the 3rd of December 2015, presumably if you go to page 72, that is then what caused you to sign the invoice on that day.
Yes, so as he says in his recommendation, he recommends that me and the acting CFO sign on the invoice. Yes, that is the same day.
So, DCJ, when you asked about the contract, there is no contract from what we can work out. The closest one gets to it is really the letter of engagement that you find at 64, which is a formal letter signed by Mr. Roy and Mr. Gama and Mr. Peter.
Mr. Gama, you confirmed that when you talked about a contract, you were referring to the letter of engagement?
Yes.
Okay.
I think in the parties tried to put in place whatever the expectations were from each other.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then if you go to page 74, you will see that this is a bank record of Trillion, which reflects, and this we get from colleagues of ours in Money Flow. On the 4th of December 2015, there's an incoming payment of 93,480,000. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So that was the money paid. And then if you go down about the middle of the page, you see an entry, 8 December 2015. The 6th entry, 8 December 2015, there's a payment out to Albertine of 74,784,000. Do you see that?
Yes.
We've then also, Chairperson, attached some parts of the transcript relevant to or relating to the evidence of Mr. Mohammed Mohammadi and Mr. Ramasabudi. Mohammed Mohammadi was called within this stream. Mr. Ramasabudi was called within the money flow stream, as you might remember. Can I just take you, please, to page 76? This is an extract from Mr. Mohammadi's evidence. And at line 18, Advocate Philip McKenna, SC, said, did you know why Trillian was paid that amount? What did they do to be paid that amount? Mr. Mohammadi answered, well, it's alleged that they were a supply development partner to regiments. That's the information that is being presented. But in discussion, and that I've had, we are unable to find any documentation or any evidence that Trillian did in fact work on the ZAR club loan. We do not believe, we're not able to. We discussed this with the previous treasurer. We asked for simple documentation, etc. Were you able to comment on that?
I think the treasurer, Mr. Ramosebudi, is the right person to talk to this. I can't talk to this. I was given the impression, Chair, and given the understanding, as we have read together those documents, that Trillian had done all of this club loan arrangement work. So I don't know if I have to go and say, let's look at what the work was, what it is that I would look for. I don't know. But the treasurer indicated to us that they had done the club arrangement. So I wouldn't be able to comment on what Mohammed is saying, what he saw or what he did not see.
Mr. Gama, did you yourself witness any work being done? You must remember that Trillian is an offshoot of regiments. Did you witness any work being done by anyone at Trillian?
Mr. Mayberg, I've said to you that I didn't do any of this work. I didn't get involved in these financial things. So my involvement is when Ramosebudi says we must go to the ADC. Trillian has been doing this work. We must change from JP Morgan, we must change from underwriting to create a club loan. And these are the people who have done that work. So I've never even been to the group treasurer's office. So
you can neither.
I cannot.
You can neither admit or dispute
I can't dispute
whether work
anything.
was done.
Yeah, I don't know.
If somebody says
it
it was not done, you can't say anything. If they say it was done, you don't know. Okay.
All right. Well, let me then take you to Mr. Ramosebudi. If you have a look at page 250.80, my colleague, Mr. Chaskelson, SC, says, well,
Did
the
you say
evidence...
0.08?
250.80. 80.
Okay. Yes, continue.
My colleague, Mr. Chaskelson, says, well, the evidence will show that the amount of 93,480,000 was paid into Trillian's bank account on 4 December. Are you aware that 4 days later, 80% of that amount, being 74,780,000, was transferred to Albertine? He says, I'm not aware of that. And then he's asked, well, can you think of any reason? Did Albertine play any role whatsoever in the club loan? He says, well, he doesn't know. Now, Mr. Gama has just again point out that on these invoice tracking schedules that were provided to Mr. Peter, payments to Albertine were actually reflected. And then over the page 81, fourth line, he asks him, did you ever encounter Albertine at all? In the second line, no, I've never encountered Albertine. And then he refers to Kubun Mudli. Did you ever meet Kubun Mudli?
No.
Now, incidentally, prior to giving this evidence, Mr. Ramosebudi at page 232 He was asked by Mr. Chaskelson, had you seen anyone from Trillion actually arranging the loan? Mr. Ramasabudi said, at the beginning when we were dealing with this, they were not there.
Sorry, is that what?
He said, at the beginning when we were dealing with this, they were not there. Chaskelson says, yes, they weren't there. And the arrangements were made by people then at regiments. Ramasabudi said, that's precisely true.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mabeg. Where are you?
So I'm reading, Chairperson, this is not in these documents.
Oh, okay.
I'm reading from page 232 of the transcript of day 314.
Not in the bundle that
No.
I have. Oh, okay, all right. Please just repeat what you read because I wasn't able to connect it with what
So at line 21, Advocate Chaskelson says, had you seen anyone from Trillion actually arranging this loan? Mr. Ramasabudi, at the beginning, when we were dealing with this, they were not there. Advocate Chaskelson, yes, they weren't there. And the arrangements were being made by people then at regiments. Mr. Ramasabudi, that's precisely true. Do you have any comment on that?
So what are you saying? Are you saying Mr. Ramasabudi says the people who did the work were from regiments, but he decided to tell us we must pay Trillion?
Yeah.
And that seems to be what he said when he's being questioned by Mr. Chaskelson.
So perhaps the work was done but by other people.
Not by Trillion.
But he then decided that he would mislead us and tell us that Trillion had been doing the work. I think that is the sum total of it from what...
Yeah, certainly that's what, from your point, you would say if you say his memos said to you, Trillion had done the work over the previous 5 months.
Yes.
And you say, oh, now he says regiments did the work. You would then say that that's not what he said in the memo if that's how you understood his memo.
Yes, because I think it's then misleading.
So perhaps I could just to finish off on this. Take you to Exhibit BB27. That's the Transnet POI reference bundle.
Mr. Mabeg, I must just say I think we will adjourn about 3:45, so just so that you can
Thank you,
pace yourself
Chairperson.
properly. Yeah. That bundle 6.
That is Transnet Bundle 6, yes, Chairperson, Exhibit BB27.
Okay, and that is on what page?
I'd like to take you, please, to page 398.
Okay.
And could I just direct your attention, because there's reference here also to the statements made by Ramasabudi. So could I ask you please to have a look at 398, paragraph 2.7.29 from the M&S report. So furthermore, in our interview with Ms. Mthepu, we know that she's from regiments, she confirmed that all the work done in relation to the club loan was executed by regiments. By the same token, Messrs. P. Ramasabudi and Rolani Madale confirmed in our interview that they only dealt with Ms. Mthepu and Mr. Wood from regiments.
So, you're saying this is a different stream. Did you establish then why Mr. Ramosebudi had claimed that Trillion did the work?
Do you have any comment on that, Mr.?
I wasn't there. I can't comment on it. I'm asking. That's
You
why I'm
say-
also asking a question: whether was Mr. Ramosebudi ever asked why he said Trillion did the work when it was done by regiments?
Maybe before we talk about that question, I just want to make sure you understand 2.7.29 at page 398. To the extent that you might not know, Ms. Mutepu, who is referred to there, she used to work for regiments. You might or might not know. She used to work for regiments. She has given evidence in the commission. And she did move to Trillion at some stage, coming from regiments. So MNS, from what we see here, did interview her as well. And so she's the one here who, according to MNS, confirmed that all the work done in relation to the club loan was executed by regiments. I think in relation to ESCOM too, you will recall earlier on I said what you were telling me was similar to what I've heard in relation to ESCOM, McKinsey, Trillion, and regiments.
Yeah.
Because under ESCOM too, ESCOM paid a certain amount of money, I think 80.4 million or 34 million, I can't remember, to Trillion in circumstances where there is a dispute as to who should have been paid. And it seems that it's regiments who had paid, who had done the work. But I think somebody like Mr. Singh might at some stage justify that Trillion had done the work, but I think he seems to accept now that it looks like the regiments had done the work, but Trillion was paid. So she testified in regard to the ESCOM situation as well, and said it was regiments which had done the work. So it looks like here too, in relation to Transnet, she says, in regard to the club loan, regiments had done the work, but Trillion was paid.
And maybe that's why, Chair, I was saying to you earlier that we got confused because regiments started writing lots of letters to us saying that we've paid the wrong people. But I don't think it was in relation to this one. What I don't understand still is if regiments did the work, why did they allow another entity to invoice?
To do what?
To invoice.
Well, maybe they didn't allow it to invoice.
Oh.
Maybe it invoiced, and the question was whether either Transnet or ESCOM decided to honor the invoice, even though another entity had done the work. So, but with regard to the question you asked, Mr. Mybeck might be able to answer, but I can just say this, that when Mr. Peter, was it Peter or Mr. Ramosebudi, who testified under the money flow work stream, Mr. Mybeck? Was it Mr. I think it was Mr. Ramosebudi.
Yes, Ramosebudi.
Yeah, that's another work stream. It may be that he was asked about that aspect, or he might not have been asked, but their focus is different. It's more on money flows. So I can't remember whether he was asked or not about why he wrote the memo that he wrote, which you understood to be saying Trillian had done the work.
Yes, that's what I've known from what he had told us. But now you're saying no.
Yeah.
Well, he says even himself that it was people from regiments. So I don't know what caused him to say to us, it is Trillian.
Yes. Mr. Mybeck, you had asked a question.
Yes, I just
maybe
wanted
that
to-
it hasn't been answered because
No,
I
not at all.
intervened.
I think the important thing, Mr. Gama, to appreciate is what's actually going on around you here. Because when you look at money flows reflects this. On the 3rd of December, you sign an invoice. On the 4th of December, 93 million is paid to Trillian. On the 8th of December, 80% of that is paid to Albertine. Albertine is linked to Gupta money laundering.
Yeah.
So just to pick up on 398, you talked about letters being written by regiments and you didn't think that it applied here. I just wanted to take you to paragraph 2.7.31. It reflects that on 12 September 2016, regiments wrote a letter to Transnet and recorded the following in relation to the club loan. 9, the payment of 93 million for the club loan. This fee relates to work done by regiments for the capital raising, transaction management and hedging advisory services related to the 1064 locomotives funding together with the club loan, for which regiments invoiced and was paid the relevant fee. So it's not that they allowed someone else to get the fee. They say that they invoiced and were paid. While it was originally anticipated that JP Morgan would be appointed lead arrangers for the club loan and regiments would assist JP Morgan in execution thereof, as you are aware, regiments at the request of Transnet ultimately took over full responsibility as lead managers, with all the incumbent work being performed by regiments. This work was completed by regiments in December 2015.
Yeah, no, it was, I don't know what to call it.
See, Mr. Gama, you met with Mr. Esser the next month in Dubai.
Yes.
All right. Then I just wanted to ask you, please, to go to page bundle 7, ECJ, page 168.
Is that page 250.158?
No, this is the original 168.
Oh, yes, I've got it. Have you got it, Mr. Gama?
So, if I could ask you to, perhaps you can keep your finger there and then turn to the beginning of the file at page 7. So your finger at 168 and then please turn to page 7. Okay. Can I just direct your attention? So this is part of the one of the 10 sixes that you were issued with. And at paragraph 1.15, you specifically address, in addition to the allegations in the
Sorry,
aforementioned...
page 7, there's
Page
no
7.
paragraph.
Are we not in this? No, you are in, sorry. Can I ask you please to go to bundle 7? It's your file.
The one that has got your affidavit.
Exhibit BB 28. I do apologize.
Okay, we go to page 7, you say?
7, please.
Yes.
So this is part of one of the 10 sixes that was issued to you. Paragraph 1.15.
Yes.
You specifically address, in addition to the allegations in the aforementioned affidavits or statements, in brackets and annexes, your involvement in the following.
I'm sorry, paragraph 1,
Point 15.
not at paragraph.
No, I'm at page 7 of bundle 7.
7.
Exhibit
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at
BB
page
28.
I'm looking at page 6. Okay, I've got page 7, yeah.
So you,
And the paragraph.
1.15, you specifically address, in addition to the allegations in the aforementioned affidavits or statements annexes, your involvement in the following. Have a look at subparagraph 2. The 1 billion rand equivalent club loan involving Trillion as lead arranger. See that?
Yeah, I see that.
Asked to address your involvement in that. And if you go then to page 168,
Yes.
you say at paragraph 53, add paragraph 1.15.2 of the notice, I had no involvement with the 1 billion rand equivalent loan involving Trillion as lead arranger.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Myback. Maybe it's too late in the day. I just seem not to find the pages you are referring to. I'm on bundle, Transnet bundle 7.
Yes.
And I am at page 168. Are you talking about 250.168?
No, the original
original
168.
That's where I am.
Okay,
But,
that's page 53 of an affidavit.
It is page 53 of the affidavit.
Then I'm referring the witness to paragraph 53. So that's right at the top.
Okay, now I can see.
And it says add paragraph 1.15.2 of the notice. That's the
The notice
regulation.
at page 20, at page 7.
At page 7, yes.
Okay, but because also when I was at page 7,
Yes.
I couldn't see the paragraph you were reading from.
Okay.
Let me,
So
you
these
see, at page 7, my first paragraph is 8.2.2.4.
No. Are you
Is it 7 of 15?
No. It's,
Or is it under divider 1? I have, when you come to,
yeah,
there is BP 28, the
Yes,
green
that's right.
divider,
that's right.
and then then you've got Mr. Gama's statement.
Well, how this bundle starts,
Maybe I was looking, I think I was looking at Mr. Gama's statement. That's the first document that I have.
how BB 28 starts, Chairperson, is
It
with
starts
your
with-
director.
BP 28 starts with indices,
Yes.
or one index, and then after the index there is a page with Mr. Todd's names all over and Mr. Mkwanazi.
I think we have to be going fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, maybe
Mr.
Mr. Gama's statement was slotted in the wrong place.
May have been.
But after the statement, I've got the 10.6 directive,
Yes. Now,
which starts on page 3, black numbers.
that is correct. And if you
then
could go to page 7 of that.
Okay, yeah, you see, I was looking at page 7 of Mr. Gama's statement. I think that's right. Now I can see. Okay.
So at page 7, that's part of the 1060, CJ.
Yes, no, now I've got both pages.
Okay, so there you will see paragraph 1.15.2, and the answer to that appears at page 168.
Yes,
And
I've got it now.
Your answer is at paragraph 53, I had no involvement. You want to comment on that?
Yes, I can say it again without any fear of contradiction, that I had no involvement.
Mr. Gama, what we've seen is that you were the final signatory on the recommendation that served before BADEC. You then signed the letter of engagement. You then signed the invoice. And you were also a signatory to a preceding memorandum authorizing you to do that. But you say you had no involvement.
Mr. Maybeck, read it for me again, 115.2.
Well, I suppose we've got to read it with 115 as well. You specifically address, in addition to the allegations in the aforementioned affidavits or statements...
No, I'm saying 115.2 at page 7.
Yes.
Read it.
You have to read it, if you bear with me for a moment, together with the lead-in paragraph. It talks about your involvement in the following. The 1 billion rand equivalent club loan involving Trillion as lead arranger.
Yes.
Your involvement.
Yes, and then I say to you, I had no involvement with the 1 billion rand equivalent loan involving Trillion as lead arranger. I don't know anything about it. I still don't.
Are we then, is this a number, did we get the number wrong? Or what are we?
Yeah, you are talking about 1 billion rand. It was 12 billion rands that we've been discussing. There's a huge difference between 1 billion rand and 12 billion rand.
I suppose it should have been the $1 billion.
Yes, so you want me to answer questions, and that's why I say to you, I have no fear of contradiction on this.
Is that the approach then that you adopted to your affidavits?
No, it's not an approach. I don't know how many lead arrangers, what do you call it? How many loans that Trillion did. So you ask me about a particular loan, and I say to you, I don't know anything about it. It's true.
Let's just get this clear. In the directive, you are asked to address, in addition to the allegations in the aforementioned affidavits or statements and annexures, your involvement in the 1 billion rand equivalent club loan involving Trillion as lead arranger.
Yeah.
So, and your answer is, I had no involvement with the, and you quote, 1 billion rand equivalent loan involving Trillion as lead arranger. And from what you are saying, your point is, if they mentioned the 12 billion rand, then you would answer differently.
Yes, that I would answer that differently, because remember, Chair,
Yes.
I'm not the group treasurer.
Yeah.
I don't know how many loans that, what do you call it, Trillion did.
Yeah.
The only one that I know is the 12 billion rand.
Yes, so
that
say,
one I know.
Yes, but this 1 billion...
The 1 billion I was not involved. I don't know
don't
anything
know,
about it. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Do you know of there having been more than one club loan?
Sorry?
Do you know of there having been more than one club loan?
I wouldn't know how many club loans are there. Transnet has got many loans. Yeah, got many loans. Different institutions. I think it's close to 100 and something billion, if I'm not mistaken.
Chairperson, that brings me to the end of my questioning in relation to the 12 billion rand club loan. This is a convenient time to adjourn.
Yes. Okay, we are going to adjourn now. What is your estimate of how how much more time you will need to
I would
finish
think-
all with evidence with.
Cumulatively, probably one day, but could be
Yes.
done easily, I think, over 2 night sessions.
Yes, I was thinking about two nights. I think what I would like both teams to do is to see whether there are evenings next week when everybody would be available. Because if I've got dates, maybe a few dates, maybe 2, 3, or whatever, but maybe 2, 3 other dates could be given for the following week, evenings, just evenings.
Yes.
Yeah, so that I'm going to look at what evenings are open next week, maybe that other week as well, so that we, if possible, we can slot Mr. Gama in. We can negotiate these dates because they are short notice.
Yes.
If we can find dates that suit everybody, we'll use them. If we can't find, then we'll give for reasonable notice and just fix other dates. So maybe Mr. Myberg and the counsel for Mr. Gama, you can talk, and then you can, Mr. Myberg, you can let me know over the weekend what dates all sites
Yes,
have
Chair,
got
please.
available. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Gama, thank you for availing yourself. We are going to adjourn, and then if you come back next week, it will be evenings that have been agreed, maybe early that other week, if so, but if we can't find dates that suit everybody, then we'll just give reasonable notice and fix dates. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
We adjourn.